Hey, what's up, y'all? How's it going? This is Wythe Marschall from Stillfleet, and usually I'm joined with Chris Pickett. Chris is off today. We're doing an off-schedule stream because we met some interesting folks. The three of an unknown number, but much larger than three, I take it. The Data Sparrow Art Collective. So really excited to talk to three members of the collective about their work. So thanks so much for making time. Really excited to hear not only about, of course, indie tabletop role-playing games, but sort of more broadly how your collective functions and how you work together. And yeah, we can talk about things even beyond RPGs, but kind of working together to make art, which is, I think, even the broader idea than just specifically RPGs, which is the art I like the most. So join with me today are three members. I'll ask you to just introduce yourselves. But again, thank you so much for making time. And maybe Rosario, if you don't mind, do you want to kind of kick it off and tell us who
Yeah,
you
sure.
are, and what is your involvement with Data Sparrow, and then we'll probably get more into sort of the specifics from there.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Rosario. I'm involved with Data Sparrow as like just doing pretty much everything that I can. A lot of people are variety people in Data Sparrow, like just multidisciplinary people who have their fingers in every pie. And so that's kind of what I do. But specifically for the tabletop games, I'm somewhat of like a cultural consultant when it comes to Japanese culture because I have a degree in Asian studies and I also do a little bit of graphic design and I'm like directing a project and as an artist myself, I'm an artist and uh, I was a solo developer for a long time, uh, just doing music, art, writing, coding, just making whatever I can for my own games. And I run a website that is like a indie games sanctuary or an indie creator sanctuary where people can just throw up their free ads and people can sift through hundreds of indie creators.
Oh, that's cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining, Rosario. Maybe Mecca, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Mecha Meme. That's what I go by most places. And like most people in Data Sparrow, I wear a lot of hats. You know, I joined pretty early on, providing a lot of sort of consulting and playtesting. I focus a lot on mechanics and helping match mechanics to the way the game is supposed to feel and what it's supposed to evoke. I do a bit of graphic design, a bit of digital art, a fair amount of 3D modeling and digital compositing for some of our games. Um, A little bit of prose writing here and there. I think that about covers everything I do. I'm very pleased to have been part of it for so long. I
Yeah.
don't have very many other public creative pursuits, but perhaps in some time there will be a few more popping up here and there. There's some stuff in the works that I it's not quite ready to reveal to the public.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we can definitely have folks back on and continue to dig into the wider collective. But I think for today, we'll probably between the three of y'all's individual work with the collective and just talking about the structure of it all told, that'll probably be a rich conversation. So last but not least, Cosette, could you introduce yourself and your work within Data Sparrow?
Hi, I'm Cassette. I just joined the collective a few months ago, so I don't have any significant contributions to the collective in specific yet, except for one thing, which it's in very early stages, and so I'm not sure if I should mention it. I'm gonna pop something. Quick question.
We got a we got a question in the chat. I think for the other members of
Hmm.
the collective here.
Yeah, yeah. It's the one thing I've actually put fingers to. Um, yeah, I'll mention it. It is actually potentially the first well, not potentially, but it is the early stages of the first foray into a video game that the collective is pursuing. um it is a single player pseudo extraction shooter, um kind of like Hole, if you're familiar with that game, that is themed after like death game concept. It's called Attica, where you're basically thrown into like a hype beast type setting, where you're muted, Wythe. Um,
Yeah, I was just laughing at
okay.
just hype beast setting is great. I'm in.
No,
I'm
yeah,
there. Yeah.
it's imagine if Marathon was a hype beast, was a death game where everyone is trying to become the greatest hype beast murderer in all of, and the arenas are like what indie racing does for like using real streets as the course. That's what this is. You cordon off a chunk of the city, you evacuate it, and you throw a bunch of lunatics into it that are all wearing like Adidas and Nike and techwear, and they're all trying to get out with as much loot as possible.
Interesting. So we can talk about maybe video games and RPGs. This is a theme that's come up, of course, from the beginning because we all play video games as well. What is the relationship between those things? And
Mhm.
yeah, how do you kind of go
But
about designing for both?
so
Um,
in specific, my contributions have been world building consultation and a little bit of art and art direction guidance so far.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for the background. I guess the one other thing we should introduce is just what is Data Sparrow in a little more depth from what I've read. So obviously you all would know a lot more, but it sounds like it's basically a group of people who are working together to make TTRPGs, but also to some degree music and video games. And it seems like the key themes are kind of science fiction involving mecha, and there's a kind of shared universe that at least a lot of the games, or the majority of the games, it seems, are tied into, which seems very rich and is somewhat based in sort of a hard SF or real world kind of diaspora from Earth to nearby, habitable planets. But of course, there's giant mecha and there's all kinds of other hijinks that are gotten up to. And the games are fairly different, but it seems like a lot of them are relatively simpler rules, like modern RPGs. Really seems like a lot of people are working on these, which is cool to see. Very different. I mean, it says very explicitly in some of your material, this is not a company. So that's one question I have. Okay, so if it's not a company, kind of are you selling products? Like, how does it work?
Mhm.
But it also is cool that it's all without AI. And there's the idea of kind of making art with your friends as this core tenant. So I think, again, this is a cool idea that we have not spent a ton of time on the show since we've had a lot of sort of solo creators or people who represent essentially small companies. But I think the idea of a pure collective is maybe a different kind of way of working is one question. So I don't know if anybody wants to jump in with kind of more to say about what Data Sparrow is, and how you kind of view it working, as opposed to maybe if you do your own solo projects that aren't part of Data Sparrow, sort of what the difference is and how that feels. If that makes sense.
I've been with Data Sparrow, I think, the longest among the people here,
Mhm.
and it's been really interesting to watch it sort of grow and morph from the very beginning stages on its very first game. Our very first game ever was, I think, our first game was Fist World Volga. I don't think there was anything before that. Um, but it sort of really from the beginning has been a Data Sparrow is kind of an environment in which people who are interested in working on a project literally for the love of the game, because they're passionate about the thing that they are coming to help build and be a part of, and giving them an environment in which they can help and build and be a part of, you know, their various different ideas. And then if they have their own idea where they can put it forward. The basic concept that attracted a lot of us together for the first game was Fist World Volga, which is a love letter both to, at least from the words of Matt, I would say our leader, even if he might not think it himself. Certainly
At
the
least,
center point of gravity around which we all revolve.
yeah, exactly.
Um, it is sort of a love letter to fighting games as well as BattleTech, and sort of trying to merge the two in a tabletop setting that is easy to learn and pick up and play, and sort of feel a game that sort of is designed to capture the flow of a fighting game and a fighting game round. That so from the beginning, that was the work of two of our members, our oldest members, and then myself and one or two other people sort of were brought on to playtest, and from there went from playtesting to rules revisions and so on and so forth until we had our first game. And I think from there, a lot of the games follow a very similar pattern where one or two creatives will have a distinct vision, start working on it, and other people pile in to help and lend their expertise as the project moves on. That's kind of how everything works, really, from making a game to doing the art to making the music, which I think is one of the things I think is coolest about Data Sparrow is that a lot of our projects have music, provided by some tracks original, some tracks not, by wonderful musical artists that we have the privilege to work with.
Yeah, that's
But
very cool.
I've yapped long enough. I think that perhaps one or two of the other members here might have something to say.
I can jump in. I think that like the way that Data Sparrow works, like is really interesting to me as someone who like I feel like the way Data Sparrow works is how I work with like completely like other like groups of people where it's like um I personally try and create an environment myself that like I can get together with friends and it doesn't have to be about money, it's for the love of the game. And we just make shit. And so like when I came into Data Sparrow, it was like, you know, a lot of things in Data Sparrow um like weren't originally in my immediate wheelhouse. I am like primarily, or I guess I was primarily a visual novel developer when I first entered into Data Sparrow. And I was making like shoujo manga vampire shit. Like I was not making anything that remotely resembled sci-fi. But the thing about Data Sparrow is that like whoever is willing to like just make things for the love of the game um is welcome there, and like the broad like amount of perspectives that are there, like you're never going to get people who are like, you don't know about blank. It's always like um like, wow, let's enlighten you about blank. Like I remember like the thing that really got me to be like, "Oh, I think I could really work with this group," was, I was asked the first time I was on voice chat with everybody, how I felt about Gundam, and I was like, "I've only seen Gundam Wing, and the, only Gundam things I really engaged with were, I when I was a kid, I, like, would just get all sorts of Gundams from my local hobby shop, and, like, I grew up making them, and I just liked making the robots, and I was met with an attitude of, that's a really fun way to get into Gundam. That's a really genuine way to get into Gundam. And I was like, oh, thank you. And then I started watching more Gundam after that. Because it just like it felt like they really truly are a group of people who like you're you're all doing the same thing. You're doing it for the love of the game.
Yeah, that's cool, and it's interesting that that you were brought in and felt you. It sounds like you were worried you didn't have enough expertise, but it also sounds like you did have familiarity, and that people are bringing kind of different inspiration. And as you get different voices attacking the same problems, the same creative setting, you're naturally going to get different perspectives. So. I'd like
Mm.
to hear sort of how this happens in practice with some of these games. I don't know if have the three of you all worked on any games together, or is there a recent
Like
game
I,
that you can speak to?
sorry,
Yeah. No, go ahead.
like I said, I do have something I want to say about like the organizational structure that you were talking about a minute ago. I joined very recently, and most of the things that are happening right now are either in very like scrappy pre-production or are already finished. So I haven't had much of an opportunity to jump in on anything yet, but I'm hoping to soon. Ex- um, the reason I did get to work on Attica was because it is in that state of like of building out. It's the one that's closest to like getting the vision put together. But as far as the organizational thing goes, imagine a company, imagine what company means to you, and now peel that back a little bit and you get co-op, where it's like this isn't a company, it's lateral, it's horizontal, everyone's involved on that level, but it's still pretty organized as that. And then take that and strip it back even further. to where it's like, this is the bare minimum necessary for money to change hands for making things together. There is like one contract and there is one way of doing things and there's a rev share and that's it. Everything else is just jump in, jump out, figure it out. Figure it out as it goes, and everything is done on the like it's very just trust and honor based. And the only thing I can think of that resembles it at all is Zaum, not the studio, the art collective, which that's a whole other history thing. But essentially, before Zaum was Zaum and they made Disco Elysium, Zaum was four Estonian communists sitting around in a dilapidated building, trading ideas back and forth for like 20 years. And they could get away with that because it was Estonia in the 90s and there was still a thriving communist scene. We don't have that luxury, but we're doing the best we can to create something similar over the internet.
Yeah, and we hope that communism comes back to Estonia, like everywhere. Just official plug, but yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, it's cool to take your touch points from collectives that have worked and to think through how that would apply in the case of the games you're working on. I am curious. You mentioned revenue share, so it sounds like, you know, just so people, if they're listening, like know if they haven't Googled Data Sparrow yet, you are publishing games. People can buy them.
Mm-hmm.
They're generally feel pretty light, pretty accessible, reasonably priced. And all of the ones I've seen so far are digital. So I had a couple questions. So one is sort of data sharing, or revenue sharing rather, and another is like, have you been doing any print products or like going to conventions, doing events, that kind of thing? I also noticed there's like VTT integration. So, I was kind of curious the scope of the collective and how much that is. Like, do y'all vote on stuff? I mean, I have a lot of questions around how it works, but um,
So, I mean, we don't. There's nothing so formal as voting.
Mhm.
It's kind of whether or not a project gets off the ground is mostly. It's kind of like Valve, I guess, where if people are interested and think it's cool, they'll help make it, and if they don't, then it doesn't get made. Most of our stuff is either pay what you want or we decide up front based on how many contributors there are, and there are generally people who are each game will usually have people who are getting paid and people who are doing it just because they like it, and sort of, you know, no one can force anybody to work on a game. So if you're doing it, it's because you like it, and also if it's your game, you're probably going to get a cut of the revenue. But otherwise, it's a very simple contract where pretty much it's split evenly across everybody who helped. And that's kind of it. When it comes to print, a lot of our stuff, in fact, almost all of it, is designed for print and play. So if you wanted to, if you wanted to play in person, we try to stick to D6s. So that all you need is a printer or a local print shop and some D6s to play our games. As for print products, in the box above me, we've got the expert. I was actually surprised, and I was kind of waiting for a time I could plug you.
I forgot that I do this for Data Sparrow.
Because before Rosario joined Data Sparrow, we didn't have anybody who knew a thing about physical media. But now there's some really wonderful acrylic standees we've seen at cons from Rosario's photos, and it's just the coolest stuff ever, I gotta say.
Thank you. Yeah, so I actually go around for Data Sparrow and I do conventions. And so I am I put wait, I have one right here. Oh my God. Oh my God, it was right there. This is so convenient. This is actually like so this is Sirius, Triunfo, and Tremarine on a physical copy. And if you flip this out, this is a USB. And
Isn't
this
that
has
the coolest?
I love these things so much. And so as you see them, you see that's just like the card, the Weltron Politic collection. And you can put that into your computer or whatever you put the USB into. And you can print this, or you can just have it on your computer or tablet, and you can take this with you if you want to play games somewhere. It's just like fun to have things on a physical copy. It's like possessing a book. Um, I and so I go around for Data Sparrow and like a few other people. Actually, it's only like one other person and myself, and I make physical games, and I I just will go to whatever markets I have access to. The revenue that we get like for these, it'll like go towards booth fees and stuff like that. And whenever I can, I will give Data Sparrow just like a full table in my booth. And I'm a huge advocate for physical media. I was featured on Polygon for a zine that I wrote because I try and spread physical media, like the draw to physical media as much as possible, to developers who just, it's Data Sparrow has very special games. It's a very special collective, and I want people to be able to hold these games in their hands. It's important to me that they get to do that. It's important to me that the work of all of these people gets to be a physical item that people can hold in their hands, and not just something that they go, look it up. It has a type of effect, and uh, the impression that Data Sparrow makes on people is very important to me. So that's why I go around to conventions, and I sell physical copies, and I load them right on my laptop. I just sit and I just load them all up.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I have to say, I love books. I've always been a book nerd, but when I got into RPG making, not just forever jamming, because I was always jamming, and so to me it was almost an annoyance to have the physical books, and I was all about the PDFs. And then as we made physical books, I've like completely flipped back again to like when I was a kid, and everything was about the physical artifacts and like the weird extra paper bits, and is there a spinny thing or a card, or there's so much fun stuff. And I think a lot of the fun, that's one reason why we have a business, is just to be able to pay for it, because it's much easier to make a PDF and release it online. And, with anything physical, especially with like when you have electronic components, you do have to like figure out, okay, how am I paying for this? But it's really fun.
Yeah.
There's a real joy to sort of handing someone, even just stickers. Like we handed people stuff yesterday to store, and it's like, it's fun to hand someone a sticker you made, and you can see their face, be like, ooh, a sticker.
Yeah.
Almost regardless of what it says. I mean, ours are usually, a mix of RPG ads and communist propaganda. So that's, I completely agree that we should have more, USBs, spinny things, stickers, etc. Even though obviously PDFs are very accessible in a great way. Print and play, is a fabulous way to make sure your games are, reaching a wide audience. And if that's one of your values, then yeah, that makes sense. D6s, print and play. Maybe there'll be other Data Sparrow games that go beyond the D6, but yeah, that's cool. I'm glad we have some of your print work to sort of show off.
To your point on physical media and
Yeah,
the little
please.
spinny things and stuff like that, I think something that I've grown, as I've been a GM frequently over the years, needing to have, for me, the thing that I miss about physical books the most, and the reason I have, a couple of physical books right here, for example, shameless plug to a wonderful creative, oh my goodness, Briar Sovereign with Armorister Advent, is a physical book. I can have bookmarks. I can have sticky notes on pages that I can go, oh, I know that this one is for the character sheet or how I resolve this certain event in this circumstance, as opposed to my nightmare, which is what I'm GMing, and have 15 tabs open of the same PDF at different points in the book. But also the effect of physical media on a person, beyond its convenience in certain circumstances, is it can make a lot of things feel a lot more real.
Mhm.
When I was younger, and I wonder if anybody else saw these at the library, there was this book called Dragonology, and it was presented as this tome, in the world of, this is a real thing. Here's the thing. It looks like, an old tome. It's got great texture. It's got little bits in it that's like, this is what the scales feel like. And you just cannot possibly do that without something to hold and touch. And, you know, we're working on a couple of projects right now that might even warrant a semi-thick book. And, if it gets mad popular, boy, would I love to make some kind of cool sci-fi book with like a interesting tech, like the texture of a binder when you're in school, like the sort of rough plastic.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like it should feel like that, and you can't do that with anything but physical media.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love
Anyway,
also the
sorry
idea of
for the ramble.
No, you don't never have to apologize. Also, I love the idea of a semi-thick book. So we're hoping you have all the species of thickness of book that you're working on. But no, that's also natural evolution. We've talked with some other folks about that of, getting into the zine scene or focusing on PDFs, and then eventually getting to the point where you really want to have the physical artifact. And as you said, it is useful that depending on the style of play and what you're running. But if you do tend to run one game, and if you like to use sticky notes, physical sticky notes, then obviously it's really nice. Beyond that, it's just lovely. They're just fun to interact with. You remember things better when you read them, when you flip through pages. That's been studied somewhere. Can
And
pull up the studies if I have to. But
I
yeah,
have
go
a
ahead.
note. I have a note about like from the perspective of like not a DM ever, but from a player. I felt whenever you said like having the PDF open 4 times so that like even as a player in five like unfortunately tragically I have most of my experiences have been in 5e
It's not a
and
bad game. It's just
I
not
know
what.
I'm
It's not the
just
perfect game
I
either.
I
Certainly.
know I that is entirely sarcastic. um D&D is fine with a capital F and a TM at the end. I don't hate it, but the feeling of like, okay, God, I'm playing as this class and I leveled up this skill. What level is it? Okay, it's that. Okay, that means I go to this page in the book and I look at, okay, read it. Okay, I got it. Okay, I'm making my roll. Okay, that's my turn. And then it rolls around and I go back. Okay, now what do I do again? And the feeling of just God, having an actual book, which I've never had because I've only ever played online. Having an actual book that you have tabbed and you can go, this is where my rules are, this is where the roll table is, and this is what I have to do. And being able to actually have that instead of just ah, there is something to be said for that. Definitely, the feeling of just like desktop windows do not have the tactile like the nature of tabletops struggles to contend with having disorganized information that is not presented in a stacked format where you know in the book where you are. That is a big thing that I've like it's a big pain point that I felt even as someone who's never played out of a book. I can just tell trying to figure out where I am in a PDF. It's just different.
Yeah, it also is to game design, like Tivex in the chat. I mean, there's different kinds of games, and there's games where you once you know the rule, you know the rule. With our games, with the grid systems, medium crunch, and you don't really need to look up the core rules because it's very simple. But then you do look up specific powers because you're not going to memorize. If there's 100 power options across different classes, things in the game, or if an encounter has unique powers, you might look that up. So there I do. Like I personally still use PDFs when I'm GMing. Like at cons, it's a lot faster. But there's a huge difference between that sort of like I have to run things on time versus I think the joy of reading my friend's stuff, getting a zine, finding time to like, oh, I'm going to read this zine for 15 minutes, right? And like page through it. And I think the impact of the art is different. I think everything about the scale is different because a PDF often it's like my orientation is different to it. It's blown up. It's like it's not the same as actually how the book is meant to be enjoyed, quote unquote. So I think there's a whole aesthetic purpose to the print object. Not to say that the PDFs aren't great. I still read a lot of
Yeah.
PDFs, but it is sort of fun to be able to do both. And I think print on demand is interesting to consider as well. The real zine kind of culture of like sharing the information and assuming that someone is going to make essentially a standard U.S. letter piece of paper folded in half, or I guess if you're elsewhere an A4 piece of paper folded in half, right? Um, and sort of designed for that experience.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
I
go ahead.
guess what I was talking about, or specifically for me, what I was saying is as a low experience, low information player, operating out of PDFs is incredibly overwhelming in a way that a pre-bookmarked book would not be.
Yeah, I mean that may also come down to information design because I will say that for these long ass books, they try. Some of the bigger companies do have a lot of chapters are colored a certain way, and you can kind of tell where you are. But yeah, some of it is just like how
Just the
much of this
PDF was a
information needs to
nightmare
be
to keep up with.
like in one object versus you could break it up differently. But there's a matchiness. So if you get Daggerheart or the 5e player's handbook or something, it's pretty much one big tome with lots and
That's
lots
the
of
one, yeah.
crunchy rules. Whereas again, if you're doing indie work, you could have a series of zines, and different zines have different aspects of those rules, and you would know what you're looking at, whether it's a PDF or print, right? Because you're pulling up an individual discrete thing. So there's all kinds of interesting ways to design. Maybe that can lead us into some examples of the games. There are a lot that were shared with me. I know there's more beyond that, so we probably don't have time to get into all the games. But are there? I don't know if there's a couple games to give a sense of either stuff y'all have worked on or games you've played by the collective that you thought were fun, and give
And
us a sense of some of the. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd actually like to say that like part of the reason I actually like got into Data Sparrow, or like where I was like, oh, like this is cool, I like this, is because I found the games to be a lot more accessible to me than D&D. I find D&D to be so inaccessible to me. I've never had a good time playing D&D, and I have played with like tons of different GMs, and I have never had a good time playing D&D because I struggle with object permanence, I have ADHD and autism, and there's just like a lot of things that I could not like supplement in a way that did not cause me additional fatigue. And actually, the first thing that I saw, like upon being introduced to Data Sparrow, was Shardana. And I remember I was talking to Matt, like in DMs, and we were just like going back and forth because both me and Matt, we are like people who make friends with people very easily. Like we will just like Matt, Mecha is always saying this, but Matt is very good at networking. Um, and I just remember being like, okay, I guess I'll check this out. And I'm like, oh, it's a tabletop game. Okay. And then I like really was like, oh, holy shit, this is like one of the only tabletop games that I have seen that I'm like actually really understanding and actually like being drawn into. Um, and that was after, like a huge chunk of time where I had only played like D&D 5e, and it was extremely frustrating to me. And so like I think that a really good aspect of Data Sparrow's games in general is that like whenever they are a thing, I look at them and I don't struggle with them. And I used to struggle a lot with tabletop games. Like I cannot stand Vampire the Masquerade because of this reason. There is so much ambiguity that I just don't work with right in my brain. But like Data Sparrow makes things like very approachable, but not in a way that is patronizing or like anti-intellectual. I think that it's just like considerate to the player.
I think that a lot of our design approach is that like one, the games should not be a pain to learn. A
Mhm.
lot of them are designed to be, we want most of our games to be something you could learn at a game night and just like finish in that game night, or some of them play at a party. One of the games that we've got upcoming is designed to be played while you're kind of sloshed with your friends and making fun of the military industrial complex. Keep an eye out for Bullshot when we announce that. Um, but oh, every game is somebody's first game, right? D&D, a lot of people play D&D in a way that assumes you have the cultural osmosis of how it works already. But a lot of the time with Data Sparrow, when we're making our games, we like to ask, does this fit? Is this important? Does this rule need to be here, and does it make the game feel the way we want it to feel? And we do a lot to avoid being confusing, I think, to make our games approachable for people who have never played a tabletop game before. For those who are going, what's all this about anyway? And a lot of our games are short because of that, but I think that we are able to fit a lot of richness and replayability into a lot of our games.
Yeah, well, in the linked universe, it's something that's come up a lot with the work of Spencer Campbell, Gila RPGs, who is a great game designer in Chicago. Who does different games with a similar system, but they're different worlds, they're different play mechanics and emphases, but they are sort of interchangeable in that in his head they're all like linked, and they're all kind of in an extended science fantasy universe with like some complicated timeline. But you don't get any of that. Each game is like a discrete window,
That
and it
sounds
kind of
familiar.
reminds me of
Is
your.
is Gila RPG the one behind Light? I've been looking into that recently.
Yeah, they're all
Yes,
like
they
one
are.
word,
They
like Light,
Lumen,
Lumen,
and they made
Nova.
Light.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
I have a copy of Light. Light's super cool.
yeah, they're yeah. Spencer's great and has a lot of cool ideas, and I think among those cool ideas, one that I admire the most is that idea of linked games, where the games are discrete. You don't need to know anything about the next games, right? They're all sort of zines that stand alone, but because there are threads that connect them aesthetically, obviously they're made by the same person, but also there's sort of mechanical nods or things borrowed from one game to the next. And again, it's all the same person, so it's not like it's just sort of interesting to see how they seem to relate. And I think one day it would be cool. We'll have to have him back on the show, but to sort of talk about his vision. But I wanted to turn it to Data Sparrow because I noticed many of the games seem to participate in the same. It seems like hard SF universe that's very much Gundam Macross coded. Like there's mechs. So I don't know if we talked a little about this before taping that maybe Matt is the person who knows the most of this lore. So without needing to go off into the weeds, if anyone can give a pitch for sort of what are these connections between the games, because they do seem standalone. Similarly, that's what made me think of it is the games seem like things where you don't need to know anything about the other games to enjoy any one, but they seem to be in the same universe. So I could imagine that if you wanted to play a campaign, you could almost play all the games and just jump from planet to planet or something. But
Absolutely, yeah, you could. So a
yeah,
lot of Data Sparrow's games are made in a setting that we kind of sometimes call mankind's reach. Um, Broadly speaking, this is I would call it a tough sci-fi setting, which there's some notes of realism and hard sci-fi, but if it gets in the way, we kind of don't pay it any mind. Um, in short, it is a few hundred years in the future. The Earth, under the United Nations and its various component states, has settled a fair number of star systems, and administrative overreach and colonial tyranny ultimately resulted in what it tends to result in, which is a war of secession called the Twilight War, in which many of Earth's colonies broke away, uh, beginning in the what we call the Cosmic East, which was the furthest away colonies from Earth. Um, in the time after this, a few states emerged. The United Systems Alliance, which is the thinnest possible veiled pastiche of the United States, um, and its neighbors to the east, which are patterned on various vaguely and less vaguely European cultures. Uh, for a time, things were good, and then for a time, things were bad when one of the French-ish planets decided that uh, they were mistreated uh, by their colonial comrades and should be in charge, and formed an empire and conquered much of that part of space. And then, as empires do, it rose and then it fell, leaving the galaxy in the state that we find it for most of our games. Volga, our first game, takes place on a sort of far frontier planet where biomech gladiatorial matches are a mix between pro wrestling and MMA with giant robots. There is in the post-war period. There is the capital city of the Avignon Empire, Lutece, where uh, street punks and skaters attempt to work their art while evading the authorities. There is the planet of Nova Fera, the planet of Triunfo, where Nova Fera is in ruin and must be rebuilt by the efforts of uh, the corporations of the United Systems Alliance and some of the forces of the Tremorine Union. Um, And then there is Tremrine Sea of the Stars, in which it's very simple. It's ultra lightweight. It's space adventure. Do what you like in this big old setting. And I think that covers everything I can think of. It's a very brief overview. Um, it's sort of a kind of retro in some places, not in others. Uh, Vision of a possible future in which we can basically fit whatever kind of game we want to make and explore different corners of the world. If I've missed anything, Zario and Cosette, feel free to pipe up.
I would say at the grandest level, when you're talking about like the Avignon Empire and the really big stuff, I would say that the tonal touchstone is very specifically Legend of the Galactic Heroes, where it is not hard. It's hard sci-fi, but it's not what an American thinks when they think hard sci-fi. The stats matter, the facts of the setting matter. Things take time to happen, but at the end of the day, what this is a story about people trapped within systems, not the systems themselves. Like American hard sci-fi really gets into like The Expanse is very hard on like what's the velocity of this thing and what's the trajectory of that thing and what's this thing made of and how does that relate to the projectiles that this thing shoots. That's not what the focus is. Those things are kept track of lore wise, but the actual point is what's this guy's problem and
There's a
how
lot of
does
guys with
yeah,
problems.
So many guys
it's
with problems.
it's more it's tonally more adjacent to like your classic 80s Japanese speculative fiction than it is to the American equivalents.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and this also makes sense in games in general. Although again, you can have different kinds of messed up guys with problems or whatever, where there's sort of simplistic good bad, power struggles. And again, the straw man, the punching bag would be sort of a 5e. There's you go kill God, right? There's kind of a demon
Yeah,
who's
this is
taken over the realm.
the
You go
polar
kill them.
opposite, where there are no BBEGs. There are just a lot of people with with narcissism issues and
Yeah.
weird hangups, and no one's right and no one's wrong.
Well, and from a game design perspective, it seems like from the games I was looking at, you have games like Sule Rally Raid where you're like racing around one of the planets, and so it's very much not like fighting monsters or something. It's like a sort of SF racing game, right? And then you have Radio Free Lutece where you're kids skateboarding in on one of the planets, and it's more about being cool and doing cool skate moves. So it does feel like a hard SF universe in that it feels like there aren't a lot of aliens or these sort of cosmic fantasy elements. But it feels like the games are not even necessarily
It,
sci-fi. They're sort of playing with other
it's very
genres within that
humanist.
extended setting. Yeah, and
The
sort of
setting is
telling
very
these
humanist. And
social stories. Yeah.
Sulai is actually fascinating. It's the only one of these games I've actually had the opportunity to play yet. It's not a racing game. A it is a constructive um it's a system for constructing an outline that you then turn into a piece of fiction. You're not racing anyone. You're on a solo you're on a solo trip around this planet, and there are little bits and pieces of lore built into the rule set, and your pass fails don't matter. It's very difficult to lose. What matters is that you construct a journey where you take a big jump and you wreck your suspension, and you have to spend a day fixing that. And then you get back on the road and you pass by a merchant and you pass fail the merchant. Well, if you fail the merchant, you get kicked out. Why did you get kicked out? What did you do? Did you offend him? Did you say something offensive? Was he trying to screw you over? That's what it is. It's not even a racing game. It's a way of creating an outline for a writer, if you want to, for a writer to then write into a little microfiction, which is just I never like it. It's a journaling game. That's what Matt described it to me as. And but just the premise of it is like there's no win, there's no lose. You're constructing a narrative that you can then flesh out as you
Yeah.
wish.
Yeah, and I should say, I mean, I said it's a racing game because it mentions you're doing a race, but to your point, and
Yeah,
mechanically, you're right. From a narrative structure standpoint, which we talk a lot about on the show, it's right. It's a journal game, and you're going on a journey, and you're using sort of story prompts based on elements drawn from sort of expedition, racing, right? Like large format stuff, and it's clearly tied into a fully baked world. I was just thinking again, it's interesting because it's about this world and your experience of it and not about sort of a sci-fi anime battle with sort of evil aliens or something like that. So
Hmm.
just again to illustrate that point that it's definitely feels like a lot of these games are very socially focused, which is very cool and very contemporary. And doesn't mean you can't do big mech beat 'em up games. I know the first game, Fist World Volga, is like fighting competition between mechs, but even then, it's actually not. No one is at war, right? It's kind of more
Hmm.
like
It's
an
just sports.
MMA, yeah, sports. So it does feel like these games are intentionally staying away from maybe that's a question to pose it as a question. Are these games staying away from some of the traditional adventure gaming kind of space operatic narratives that you might see in sort of other contemporary SF that is trying to do all of science fiction at once? You know.
So a lot of our stuff exists in sort of a space of the stories of the games we make are very much in the corners of a world in which it has already undergone the great structural changes. Um, the evil empire has been defeated, you know, the tyrannical dictators overthrown, and what exists are people. And most of our games are ultimately about their lives. You know, one of our oldest persistent characters that has stuck around in some pretty good fan fiction. Well, I shouldn't say fan fiction, just fiction by Matt, which you can find if you look, I'm sure, is about the a former soldier turned uh, essentially mech wrestling heel, and in that way, life goes on even for the people who used to be on the stage. But for most of our games, it's just what is happening here after all the shooting has stopped. And in some places, that's really cool powerboat racing, and in some places, that's rebuilding a planet. Another
Right.
place,
Right.
it's a rally race across a planet for to help build a sense of unity. But
Yeah.
we haven't made any game about grand narrative or about the traditional trappings of epic science fiction, I think.
Yeah, well, mentioning rebuilding Triunfo and the idea of it feels like maybe an analog to like a North Korea state is now being opened up by the liberal states or whatever. Something like that is happening, but there's sort of liberal corporations colonizing this planet. But the planet is deeply impoverished and it does lacks infrastructure, and so it seems like it's an interesting, weird political setting where it's completely divorced from real Earth today. So I don't mean to put those words in your mouth. That was just my sense in skimming it. Right, is like what does this sort of feel like? But it seems like this more complicated, longer game that not at all necessarily unapproachable or something like that, but just more sort of involved, more board gamey, kind of economic sim stuff, which definitely leans into that whole social element because it does feel like you're playing, a company and you're developing a whole planet, and that's I think a very interesting take on again kind of hard SF and like what even is an RPG and in a way blending a lot of the different kind of levels of crunch or like what's a story element versus something where you're tracking number go up or down. So yeah, it definitely feels like there's a lot of deep thought behind these, and again, that made me think of Spencer's games because you feel they're connected deeply. You guys have like a lore document, but that's not in the games, right? The games are meant to be, as you say, very approachable. So it's very cool to sort of see that type of sci-fi develop. Also, there's a lot of mention of like specifically Occitan French, which I feel like comes up a lot weirdly on our show. So that was kind of interesting. But
Occitan
um,
French is kind of a weird special interest of mine, and I could not for the life of me tell you why. Actually, no,
it's
I
cool.
do remember. I was looking, so I invented the name of Tremorine way back, uh, before any of the lore, and I was trying to reverse engineer the a language that existed from the name. And so I'd sort of shopped around European languages for a bit, and Occitan French had gotten the closest. And at the time, this was probably 6 or 7 years ago. There was Google Translate now has Occitan French as a translation option, but at the time it didn't. So it was interesting and kind of seemed out of the way and new and weird to me, and it bit me and it never let go.
Yeah, yeah, it's a little like standard French, but you can tell it's different. It is a different language, and it's yeah, I think it has still some of the shine of a people whose history was more or less maybe not erased by the state, but metabolized into a state project, and
And
that was
thankfully,
regularized.
the language has been preserved. But for a time, it was on the verge of being sort of eliminated by the l'Académie française, uh, the academy that sort of governs the French language, as I understand it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's how it be. I mean, there's thousands of languages that have within recent history become extinct or endangered due to sort of the march of global hegemonic languages in different regions, and of course globally English and now Chinese. Before we get too lost in the sauce there, though, I want to make sure to turn it over to you, give you all the final word, of course, plug things, talk about your own work and Data Sparrow's work. I've a million more questions. But one question I did want to ask was about sort of the politics. So I think it's interesting, just building on what y'all have said about some of these events have already taken place, and you're telling the stories of sort of the next phase. I don't know, just because we talk about it a lot on the show, do you feel at all sort of motivated to make games that have a kind of political point of view? Do you all talk about that stuff when you do game design? I mean, totally fine if the answer is no. It's really just an honest question.
So Uh, okay, so I know that like for me, myself, like I'm trans. When it comes to anything that I make, it's always going to have some sort of like political undertone because I can't like hide it like in anything that I make. And I was recently like working on a game that I haven't like announced yet with Data Sparrow, but like I was working on a game and I wrote like an actual like manifesto for it, like an ideological manifesto. And this game in like the premise is like kind of silly. It's not a game that you would think would have some sort of like ideology behind it. But it messes with a lot of aesthetics of like and like associated fads of like the late 80s through to the 90s and early 2000s. And it was very important to me that we didn't keep like a toxic level of nostalgia there, and that the aesthetics were supposed to work in a way that is separate from a sense of look at this and feel like you're in a better time. Uh, and in general, I think like the way that Data Sparrow games work, and when it comes to like ideology behind them, uh, it, I feel like there's a mindfulness there that like must be present. And I even feel like with what we were saying about it, you just have to be. It's just about people. Um, I think that this is something like a part of Data Sparrow games that makes them like sets them apart from other like specifically if I'm talking about the tabletop games. I think it sets them apart from a lot of other tabletop games that I've personally tried, or that are in like my specific social circles. Like my husband is really into like different LARP groups and everything in our area, and like does LARP with his friends, and there's a lot of like fantasy RPGs and everything, and they're always really locked in, and it always feels like everybody is trying to have some sort of big, grandiose like thing happen for their characters. But with Data Sparrow games, it feels like you are incentivized to like be with other people and be pro-social about it. It's not about using the game as a way to fulfill a narrative that like really fulfills you on the inside, I feel. Uh I feel like whenever I look at a Data Sparrow game, like it is about like being in a group and just it's a very pro-social thing, and so I feel compelled to inside and outside of Data Sparrow like make things that I consider to be pro-social and encourage like faith in humanity.
Yeah, that's so well said. Yeah, no, I think that's. I mean, I think everyone should make RPGs that are pro-social for sure, and
Hmm.
not weird, contests of who's better at like improv, pretending to be
Yeah.
hobbits or whatever. Um, But yeah, sorry. Any other final thoughts on anything I've asked before I just turn it over and ask you all to sort of shout out your work.
Nope.
Okay.
When it comes to Data Sparrow's politics, I think it would be an understatement to say that there is close to the largest variety you could imagine in Data Sparrow. I think the one thing that kind of underpins all of it is that like Rosario was talking about, we kind of love people. We love making things with people. We love playing things with people. And I think that kind of underwrites a lot. And I think it's probably why we focus in on the people of the setting that we write in. And especially Matt. I've got to shout out Matt's prose because I haven't had a chance to do that yet. Matt writes wonderfully amazing prose, and for a lot of our games, provides little narrative blurbs that give you a peek into the life of the people in the place we are making a game about. And I think that our politics are just we are very humanist above all else, above any other label. I think that's what we care about.
Okay. Well, I think with that, let's turn it over to the three of y'all to close this out. I mean, where can we find your work and support you? I mean, obviously, I'm going to throw in the chat the website and the itch. But I don't know if you want to shout out any current or upcoming work, anything you're particularly excited about that Data Sparrow is up to, or that you as a creator are up to. Um, yeah, well, how would you like people to sort of engage with Data Sparrow?
I can throw a link to physical copies of Data Sparrow, so people can actually like acquire. You can get the USBs online if anybody wants to purchase the collections that way. So I'll just throw a link to that in the chat. Um, but yeah, everybody else can kind of plug their stuff while I get that.
Yeah,
Okay.
does anyone have a shout out? Yeah, go for it.
Mecha?
I don't really use my socials for anything, except for liking cool art. But Data Sparrow is my main outlet for public creativity, so it's really that. In the upcoming future, there will be more games. I'm making some games with other friends, multiple other games with other friend groups, and let me just ask if. Oh, he's not online. There's another friend who perhaps I'll have to introduce you to him or him to you at some point when his game is more complete. But I think that you'd be quite interested in it. But that's about it. I suppose a long-winded way of saying no, but keep an eye out.
As for me, I have unfortunately not been able to get my ideas off the ground just due to lack of opportunity and lack of contact, but it's part of why I'm here. Get some faces, get some names, get some feelers out there, Um, my main social these days is my name here, Cosette Tape on Blue Sky. Basically, no one has this name, so if you see this name, it's probably me on any website. I'm going to try to get my shit together and actually start like posting things by the end of year. So Gammy and I've been plugging away at half a dozen or more projects that all deserve to be real for a very long time, and I finally feel like I'm starting to get the actual social network that I need to actually work on those, aside from toiling away as a nobody in my bedroom. So, God willing, within the next 6 to 10 months, there'll be something on that account. So I'll keep an eye
Um,
out.
yeah.
Cassette tape
Uh,
on Blue Sky.
Also, I'm going to put, I guess I will formally plug myself. I'm Prince Rosalium on Blue Sky, and I also have my website, Pura Pro, that I just threw in there. And that is uh, where I keep my work, my visual novel series, and my Indie Haven, where you can go and browse through a bunch of ads for indie creators. They're free, and if you are an indie creator, you can submit your ad. You will see Data Sparrow's website linked right on the homepage. We should also probably plug Data Sparrow as a website. If you would like to, see things on the official website. Do you have the website linked there? Like the
I think
official
it should be
website?
in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, cool, cool,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, I put it in the chat. We can make sure that's
Okay. Because I
prominently
hadn't seen what you
indicated.
have links. I know you mentioned before you have the itch, and I'm like, oh, okay. I hope, yeah. But yeah, that's just the general indie sanctuary that I run very slowly. But I still run it because I am always I'm either at markets, doing things for Data Sparrow and Project Menagerie, which is my project of, getting physical games out there. Um, or I am working on games that I have not announced yet.
Keep an eye out for them. The work that's being done really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very, very excited.
Well, cool. Well, we will have to check back in with Data Sparrow and you all as creators. And in the meantime, sounds like there's tons of people doing interesting things in the shared universe and in a way that where you're sharing uh, different roles in terms of the art, sharing some revenue, and yeah, just kind of forming a chill collective. So sort of a different approach. Maybe there's other groups of friends out there doing this, making RPGs, probably other games as well. But this is again one of the first times I've heard really of a pretty big group with a seemingly pretty dedicated vision, pretty serious take, but that yeah is not really a company and is operating under this different model. So sort of seems like more of a sort of an anarchist model in that sense of sort of self-organizing, and kind of parallel with some of the things going on at the level of small companies and RPGs and whatnot. It's interesting, of course, to talk about sci-fi, and we could talk all day about yeah the inspiration for the different not real Europe, but drawing on sort of real world places as inspiration for some of these planets, and then how the different games are all different takes and not space opera. So thanks for coming on, talking about some of our favorite things. Making art with your friends and playing across genres, and yeah, making accessible modern RPGs. Um, Everyone should check out Data Sparrow. And until then, thanks for listening or watching Why We Roll. And yeah, thanks to all three of y'all. Everyone, we can just, I don't know, wave our hands excitedly or just yell. But I'm going to end the stream if everyone's good. All right. Thanks,
It's been an
y'all.
absolute pleasure.
Thanks.